Hello, and welcome to the Snoozy Scientist. Tonight, we're taking a slow, thoughtful wander through one of Earth's most astonishing stories, the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs ruled this strange, beautiful world. That's longer than flowers have been around, longer than humans could ever dream of. They grew into giants and shrank into small, bird-like shapes. They lived in deserts, swamps, forests, and polar plains. And then, one day, they were gone. So how did they do it? How did they rise up after a world-ending disaster and come to rule almost every corner of the Earth, only to vanish when a rock from space struck our planet? That's what we're here for. No rush, no noise, just a calm walk through deep time to see how the dinosaurs came and went and what they left behind for us to find. But before we wander off, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment and tell me what time it is wherever you're winding down. And if you enjoy these sleepy rambles, please gently tap the like button and consider subscribing. It helps this snoozy little corner of the internet keep growing. Now let's begin. Before the first dinosaur ever left its footprints in soft mud, the Earth had to survive a moment so devastating that it nearly emptied the oceans and silenced the land. This moment, known as the end Permian extinction, or simply the Great Dying, remains the worst mass extinction our planet has ever seen. It was so severe that it erased nearly 90% of all marine species and about 70% of life on land. Imagine that for a moment. Entire reefs turned to ghost towns, forests stripped bare, and the once busy sounds of insects, amphibians, and early reptiles replaced by silence and wind. If Earth had a reset button, this was it. To understand how the dinosaurs rose to power, we first have to stand in the ashes of what came before. Roughly 252 million years ago, life on this planet was thriving in strange and varied forms. Giant insects buzzed over swampy forests, early reptiles and amphibian-like creatures prowled the land, and warm, shallow seas were filled with corals, trilobites, brachiopods, and other oddities we rarely see today. This ancient world looked and felt different in almost every way, but beneath its surface, the Earth was restless. No single cause explains the Great Dying, but many scientists believe a series of colossal volcanic eruptions played a leading role. In what is now Siberia, a massive region known as the Siberian Traps spewed lava and toxic gases for hundreds of thousands of years. These eruptions released enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. As these greenhouse gases built up, they caused a dramatic spike in global temperatures, turning seas warm and sluggish. In those shallow seas, low oxygen levels and ocean acidification created conditions that suffocated marine life from the bottom up. Coral reefs collapsed, shelled creatures dissolved, food chains unraveled. On land, things were just as grim. Forests withered under acid rain, soils eroded and washed into the sea. Many animals and plants that had thrived for millions of years could not cope with the fast changes. Even the insects, which are usually so adaptable, suffered enormous losses. The Earth became a patchwork of barren landscapes and toxic waters. It is chilling to imagine walking through what was once a thriving forest and finding nothing but charred tree trunks, cracked earth, and an air thick with the smell of ash and sulfur. What is perhaps even more remarkable is what survived. Some hardy creatures scraped by in the few remaining corners of livable habitat. Small reptile-like synapsids, distant relatives of mammals, dug burrows or found refuge near water sources. Certain tough plants managed to cling to life, stabilizing the soil just enough to slow erosion. In the oceans, a few opportunistic species endured in deep or coastal areas where oxygen was still present. Life was on life support, but it never gave up completely. Scientists can see the fingerprints of this extinction in rocks all over the world. Thin, dark layers of carbon-rich material mark the sudden drop in life. Fossil beds that once teemed with shells and bones suddenly go quiet. It is as if someone turned down the volume on the entire planet. But hidden in those same layers are the seeds of what would come next. With so many dominant species wiped away, nature found itself with vast empty spaces to fill. Ecosystems that once belonged to amphibians and strange reptiles were now open territory. Evolution, patient and relentless, started to experiment once again. The end Permian extinction did not just kill off species, it cleared the stage for new stories to begin. From the survivors came the ancestors of creatures that would go on to reshape the land, the sky, and the sea. Among these survivors were the early Archosaurs, the so-called ruling reptiles that would eventually give rise to crocodiles, pterosaurs, birds, and of course the dinosaurs themselves. It is strange to think that without this great tragedy, there might never have been a T-Rex stomping through a floodplain or a tiny bird-like raptor darting between ferns. In this sense, the Great Dying was both an ending and a beginning, a dark doorway through which life had to pass to reinvent itself. It reminds us that Earth is not static. It resets, reshapes, and renews again and again. And in the quiet after the world's worst disaster, new life was waiting to grow just beneath the ashes. After the Great Dying, Earth was a quiet, wounded place. The silence left behind by so much lost life hung heavy over barren plains and shallow seas. For thousands and thousands of years, the world looked like it might never fully recover. But life, as it so often does, found a way to begin again, and out of the ashes of the Permian extinction came the dawn of a new era, the Triassic. If you could stand on Earth in the early Triassic, you might not recognize it at all. Nearly all the continents we know today were still joined together in one enormous supercontinent called Pangaea. This single landmass stretched nearly from pole to pole. You could have walked from what is now New York to Morocco to Mumbai without crossing a single ocean. But this vast land was not lush or welcoming. Most of Pangaea's interior was bone dry, dominated by wide open deserts and sparse scrubland. Rain rarely fell far from the coasts. Winds whipped across endless plains, carrying sand and dust for miles. The skies were filled with ash and steam from constant volcanic activity. The Earth's crust, still unsettled by the massive upheaval of the Permian period, cracked and heaved, creating chains of volcanoes that belched gases into the air for centuries at a time. Along the edges of this supercontinent, there were rivers, deltas, and a few green pockets where plants clung to life. Here, life slowly crept back. Hardy ferns, cycads, and conifer trees pushed their roots into poor soil, anchoring the land and feeding the first returning insects and small reptiles. These patches of green were fragile but vital, offering food and shelter for whatever creatures managed to adapt to the harsh new world. In this strange environment, the stage was set for something remarkable. With so many of the old giants gone, the survivors were free to experiment. Evolution tried out new ideas, mixing old designs with fresh twists. Among the survivors were a special group of reptiles known as the Archosaurs, which means ruling reptiles. They did not look much like the mighty dinosaurs we think of today. Not yet, anyway, but they carried in their bodies the blueprint for a future empire. Archosaurs had some advantages that helped them stand out. Many of them walked with their legs positioned directly under their bodies, rather than sprawling out to the sides like a lizard's. This new posture made them faster, stronger, and more efficient. They could chase prey and cover long distances without tiring quickly. Their hips and shoulders were built like sturdy bridges, able to carry more weight and support larger frames. Some developed early air sac systems in their lungs, allowing them to breathe more easily in the thin, sometimes choking air of the Triassic. One of the earliest Archosaurs was Euparkeria, a small, nimble predator that darted through the rocky undergrowth in what is now South Africa. Euparkeria was no bigger than a house cat, but its bones reveal features that point the way forward: light skeletons, upright legs, and a flexible tail that helped it balance as it ran. Imagine it slipping between ferns, quick as a flash, snatching up insects and tiny amphibians. Creatures like Euparkeria were nature's rough drafts for what was to come. Not all Archosaurs were destined to become dinosaurs. Some lines gave rise to the ancestors of crocodiles, who would follow a different path, trading speed for stealth and armored skins. Others would one day take to the skies as pterosaurs, mastering flight in a world still so raw and unstable. But one branch of this family tree would shape the future in a way no one could have guessed back then. While the earth itself rumbled and shifted, these early reptiles quietly expanded into empty spaces. The harsh Triassic climate rewarded animals that could move fast, breathe well, and survive dry spells. As plants grew back and insects spread, so did the Archosaurs. Over millions of years, they slowly grew larger and more diverse. Tiny hunters gave way to bigger, more ambitious forms that would soon step into the true role of dinosaur. When we think about dinosaurs, we often picture massive armored beasts or sharp-toothed giants thundering across green plains. But it all started here, in a world that was mostly brown and dusty, under skies streaked with volcanic haze. The Triassic dawn was not a paradise, it was a proving ground. It tested each new life form with scorching heat, fierce droughts, and the ever-present threat of sudden change. Only the most adaptable survived. In the grand story of life on Earth, this was a new beginning. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest changes happen in the background, slow and steady. From one continent to another, small creatures laid the foundations for an age that would someday be ruled by giants. And so, in the quiet warmth of the Triassic sun, the seeds of the dinosaur dynasty were planted, tiny, quick, and ready for whatever came next. By the time the Triassic sun rose on a healing world, life had learned how to survive disaster. The creatures that clung on through the Great Dying were tough, patient, and ready to adapt. Among these survivors, one special group quietly began to stand out: the Archosaurs. Their name means ruling reptiles, and they would live up to it in ways the early Earth could never have guessed. Archosaurs were not the biggest animals on the block at first. Many of them were small, nimble hunters or sturdy, crocodile-like creatures lurking near rivers and lakes. But they carried inside them a powerful set of advantages that would one day shape the entire age of dinosaurs. To understand how the dinosaurs rose to power, you have to understand why these early Archosaurs were so well equipped for life in a rough and changing world. One of the biggest advantages they had was posture. Before the Archosaurs, most reptiles moved with their legs sticking out to the side, like a modern lizard or salamander does today. This sprawl meant they could not lift their bellies far off the ground. Moving took a lot of energy, and running for long distances was nearly impossible. Archosaurs, however, changed the game. Their legs shifted underneath their bodies, acting like sturdy columns to hold up their weight. This simple change allowed them to walk and run with greater speed and balance. They could stand taller, see further, and chase down prey that other animals could not catch. Imagine the difference between trying to run a marathon while crawling on your hands and knees versus standing upright with your legs beneath you. That is the leap that Archosaurs made. Their posture was not the only thing working in their favor. Archosaurs also developed a more efficient way to breathe. Many scientists believe that some early archosaurs had a system of air sacs connected to their lungs, much like modern birds do today. Instead of breathing in and out like a mammal, which leaves stale air trapped in the lungs, this system allowed fresh air to flow through in one direction. It meant they could take in more oxygen with each breath, a huge advantage in a world where oxygen levels were often lower than they are now. With better breathing came more energy. These animals could stay active longer, hunt more effectively, and move into new environments that other creatures found too harsh. This clever breathing system hints at something else, too. There is evidence that some archosaurs may have been at least partly warm-blooded. In simple terms, being warm-blooded means you can regulate your body temperature from the inside rather than relying on the sun or shade. For cold-blooded animals like most modern reptiles, activity often stops when the temperature drops, but a warm-blooded creature can keep moving even when conditions are less than ideal. This allowed early archosaurs to hunt at dawn or dusk when their prey was sluggish, or to survive in places that were too chilly for other reptiles. And these combined traits, upright posture, powerful lungs, and warm-blooded tendencies, formed the first hints of what would one day become the dinosaur blueprint. Of course, not every archosaur became a dinosaur. Some followed different paths. One branch would evolve into the ancestors of today's crocodiles, trading upright running for powerful tails and armored skins, perfect for ambushes in rivers and swamps. Another branch would take to the skies, becoming the pterosaurs, the first reptiles to master true flight. But the branch that would become the dinosaurs stayed mostly on land and kept refining the qualities that made them so successful. They grew more agile, their legs grew longer and stronger, and their bodies became lighter. Their hip bones and shoulder joints shifted to support bigger muscles. Their feet changed to better grip the ground as they ran. Even their tails acted as counterweights, giving them balance as they moved. Bit by bit, the Archosaurs shaped themselves into creatures that were ready to take over the world when the chance came. It is strange to think that such small and simple changes could build a foundation for the age of giants. But that is how nature often works. Tiny advantages add up, generation after generation, until one day you look around and see an entire planet ruled by the descendants of these early experiments. The Archosaurs did not know they were laying the groundwork for something extraordinary. They simply did what life does best: adapt, survive, and pass on what worked. In the dry forests and river valleys of the Triassic, their shadows flickered against the rocks as they hunted and hid, unaware that they were the first echoes of a coming age, the age when dinosaurs would truly take the lead. Once the early Archosaurs had carved out their place in the harsh Triassic world, nature's next experiment began to take shape. From this tough, adaptable family of reptiles came a new branch that would one day take over nearly every corner of the earth. These were the very first true dinosaurs, small at first, quick on their feet, and carrying in their bones the promise of giants to come. The Triassic was not an easy time to be alive. Even though millions of years had passed since the Great Dying, the land was still dry and harsh. Rainfall was unpredictable. Vast deserts stretched across the interior of Pangaea, broken up by patches of forest, muddy river valleys, and fern-filled floodplains. The air was warm and sometimes thin, and volcanoes still rumbled in the distance, shaping the land with fire and ash. In this tough environment, the earliest dinosaurs found ways to thrive. Among the first dinosaurs we know by name are creatures like Eoroptor and Herrerasaurus. These were not the towering giants we think of when we hear the word dinosaur. Eoraptor, whose name means dawn thief, was about the size of a medium dog. Its long tail and lightweight bones made it quick and agile. Eoraptor likely hunted small animals and insects, using its sharp teeth and claws to snatch up prey in the undergrowth. Herrerasaurus was larger, closer to the size of a small horse, and had a more powerful build. Its strong legs and long jaws made it a capable predator, able to chase down other reptiles and early mammal-like creatures that wandered too close. It is almost funny to picture these early dinosaurs compared to what would come later. There were no massive horns or heavy armor yet, no long necks reaching into the treetops, no plates or sails or clubbed tails. Instead, they looked a bit like lanky, upright lizards with long tails and alert eyes. But their simple bodies held the first hints of what would make dinosaurs so successful. They were bipedal, meaning they walked on 2 legs instead of 4. This freed up their front limbs for grasping and clawing, and it gave them an edge in speed and balance. They could dart through ferns and around trees faster than many of their slow-moving neighbors. And neighbors they certainly had. The Triassic world was filled with strange creatures. Giant amphibians still lurked near rivers and lakes, looking like oversized salamanders with wide mouths ready to snap up fish and unwary reptiles. Early synapsids, distant ancestors of mammals, shuffled through the dry underbrush. These reptile-like creatures had odd bodies that looked like a mix between a lizard and a mammal, with sprawling legs and strange heads, sometimes crowned with horn-like bumps or frills. Some were fierce predators, others were stubborn plant-eaters, rooting through tough desert plants for food. In this crowded and dangerous landscape, the earliest dinosaurs carved out their niche by being fast and flexible. They were opportunistic hunters, feeding on whatever they could catch. They likely laid eggs in simple nests scraped out in sandy soil, guarding them just enough to give their hatchlings a fighting chance. Small packs of Eoraptor or Herrerasaurus may have stalked dry riverbeds at dawn, staying alert for larger predators that could easily turn the tables on them. One of the reasons these small dinosaurs did so well was their ability to adapt to changing conditions. Fossils show that early dinosaurs spread to different parts of the supercontinent, filling gaps left by other animals that could not keep up with the rough climate swings. Their upright stance and lightweight skeletons let them run further and stay active longer than their competition. Over time, these simple but effective traits became the foundation for more specialized species. It is strange to think that these early dinosaurs lived in the shadow of creatures that looked far more fearsome. Some of the other archosaurs at the time grew into huge crocodile-like predators that dominated rivers and lakes. The giant amphibians, though clumsy on land, were strong swimmers and a real threat near water. But the dinosaurs kept their edge. They stayed small, fast, and ready to slip away when danger got too close. In the fossil beds of Argentina, Brazil, and other parts of the world that were once joined as Pangaea, paleontologists have uncovered delicate bones and footprints left behind by these first pioneers. Each fragment tells us a little more about how the dinosaurs began. They were not rulers yet, but they were patient, they were adaptable, they were ready to take over when the next twist in Earth's story cleared the path. From Eoraptor's light-footed steps and Herrerasaurus's powerful jaws, the age of the dinosaurs was just beginning to rumble to life. It would be millions of years before they grew into giants, but here in the Triassic, the blueprint was already there, tucked inside these small, clever hunters who dared to survive when the world demanded it most. 6 outcompeting rivals by the middle of the Triassic period. the first true dinosaurs were still only small players on a very crowded stage. They shared their world with a wild mix of creatures, giant amphibians that slithered through slow rivers, ancient reptile-like synapsids that rooted through dry scrubland, and other archosaurs that grew into fearsome predators or heavily armored browsers. In this rugged landscape, survival came down to one simple question: who could adapt the fastest? At first glance, dinosaurs might not have looked like the obvious winners. They were not the biggest animals around. They did not have massive jaws or thick armor yet, but inside their bodies were two simple upgrades that would change everything: a new way of standing and a new way of breathing. Together, these traits gave them a quiet but powerful edge over their Triassic rivals. It all started with posture. Most reptiles before the dinosaurs kept their legs sprawled out to the side, like modern lizards do today. Imagine a lizard dragging its belly over hot sand. This sideways sprawl works well for short bursts of movement, but it uses a lot of energy and makes it almost impossible to run long distances. Dinosaurs changed this old design. Their legs were positioned directly underneath their bodies, like the sturdy columns of a bridge. This meant they could stand taller, carry their weight better, and move much more efficiently. This upright posture allowed dinosaurs to do something their competition could not. They could walk and run for longer stretches without tiring out. A dinosaur with its hips under its spine could lift its belly high off the ground, making it quicker and more agile. The tail, held straight and stiff behind, helped balance the body as it moved. All this added up to a huge advantage when chasing prey or escaping larger predators. It meant that a small dinosaur like Archosaurus could dart in and out of cover, strike fast, and get away before something bigger could catch it. Posture was only part of the story. Dinosaurs also had lungs that likely worked more efficiently than those of many other reptiles around them. Many paleontologists believe that early dinosaurs shared a type of breathing system similar to what we see in modern birds. This system used a series of air sacs connected to the lungs. Instead of breathing stale air in and out like mammals, air flowed in one direction through the lungs. This steady stream gave them a constant supply of fresh oxygen, which was especially helpful in the sometimes thin, unpredictable air of the Triassic. Better breathing meant more stamina. While other reptiles panted and rested to catch their breath, dinosaurs could keep going. They could hunt longer, migrate further, and stay active when temperatures dropped or rose quickly. This flexibility gave them an edge in a world that never stayed the same for long. When food was scarce or seasons shifted, the dinosaurs could travel to find new feeding grounds, while other animals struggled to keep up. Of course, not every rival disappeared right away. The Triassic was still full of strange and successful animals. There were huge crocodile-like reptiles that prowled the water's edge, armored creatures that rooted through dry brush, and small mammals that scurried through the undergrowth by night. But over millions of years, the dinosaurs' quiet advantages helped them hold on while many others faded away. Then, nature handed the dinosaurs their big break. Around 200 million years ago, at the boundary between the Triassic and Jurassic periods, Earth faced yet another mass extinction. It was not as massive as the Great Dying, but it was enough to knock out many of the dinosaurs' strongest competitors. Scientists think huge volcanic eruptions tore through what is now the Atlantic region, filling the sky with ash and gases. Climate patterns swung wildly, temperatures rose and fell, food chains broke apart again. Large amphibians and many ancient archosaurs could not adapt fast enough. The open spaces they left behind were like vacant homes waiting for new tenants. This time, the dinosaurs were ready. With their upright posture and efficient lungs, they were better prepared for the changing world. They moved into new environments quickly, filling empty niches left by other reptiles. Plant eaters grew larger, feeding on the recovering forests and ferns that spread in the wake of the extinction. Meat eaters became faster and more specialized, hunting in ways their ancestors never could. From small packs of two-legged hunters came herds of long-necked giants and sharp-toothed predators that would rule for the next 135 million years. What is so fascinating about this turning point is how quiet it must have seemed at first. There were no sudden parades of giant dinosaurs overnight. There were no battles for the crown of Earth's new rulers. It was simply that the traits that worked, posture, lungs, stamina, carried these ancient reptiles forward when others fell behind. Step by step, footstep by footstep, the dinosaurs began to spread across the land, ready to take their place as the world's next great experiment in survival. In the fresh dawn of the Jurassic, the footprints of their rivals slowly disappeared from the mud and stone. In their place, new tracks stretched out under the rising sun, marking the start of a reign that would echo through time, long after they themselves were gone. The dinosaurs were no longer just survivors. They were becoming rulers, and the world was theirs to reshape. Jurassic Earth transformed. By the time the Triassic had given way to the Jurassic, the world looked and felt like it was waking up from a long, restless sleep. This was a time when the dinosaurs began to grow bigger, braver, and more varied than ever before. But they did not do it alone. The Earth itself was changing right under their feet, reshaping the stage for one of the greatest expansions of life our planet has ever seen. Close your eyes and imagine this world for a moment. Gone were the endless dry deserts that had dominated so much of the Triassic. In their place rose vast stretches of lush green forests. Ferns the size of small trees carpeted the ground, while towering conifers reached for the sky, their branches heavy with cones and needles. There were no flowering plants yet, but dense groves of cycads and ginkgo trees added to the rich green canopy. In these forests, the air was thick and humid, carrying the scents of wet leaves, moss, and ancient wood. You would hear the gentle splash of streams and the buzz of insects weaving between ferns, along with the distant calls of creatures that had never seen the likes of humans. The climate of the Jurassic was warm and steady, with higher levels of carbon dioxide than today. There were no ice caps at the poles, so even the higher latitudes supported forests and wandering dinosaurs. Rain fell in regular patterns, feeding rivers that wound their way through valleys and floodplains. Shallow seas spread across low-lying parts of the continents, creating rich coastal wetlands teeming with life. Coral reefs, much different from the ones we see today, formed underwater havens for fish, shellfish, and other marine creatures that flourished in the warm, sunlit shallows. One of the most important changes during the Jurassic was what was happening deep within the Earth's crust. Pangaea, the great supercontinent that had once stretched nearly from pole to pole, was beginning to break apart. Tremendous forces under the surface pulled the massive landmass into separate pieces. Cracks widened into valleys. Valleys widened into shallow seas. Over millions of years, Pangaea slowly split into two huge continents, Laurasia to the north and Gondwana to the south. This slow drifting would continue until our modern continents took shape much later, but even these early rifts had a powerful effect on life. As the land broke up, new coastlines formed. Inland seas and wide river basins created fresh habitats for plants and animals. Isolated pockets of forest and wetland became natural laboratories for evolution, where species could grow apart from each other and try new paths. Dinosaurs that once roamed across one giant continent now found themselves separated by growing seas or impassable mountain ranges. This isolation gave rise to unique species, each adapted to their corner of the world. The warm, moist climate made life easier for giant plant eaters, who found no shortage of leaves and needles to munch on. Herds of sauropods, the long-necked giants that would come to define the Jurassic, moved slowly through ancient plains, their massive bodies clearing wide paths through the trees. Behind them, smaller dinosaurs followed, picking at fresh shoots or insects disturbed by the passing giants. Predators adapted to these rich hunting grounds, learning to work in packs or stalk quietly through dense foliage. Even the skies were different now. Pterosaurs, those early flying reptiles, soared above the forests and coastlines, diving for fish or nesting on rocky cliffs that overlooked ancient lagoons. Under the surface, seas were alive with their own wonders. Shallow, warm waters became nurseries for marine reptiles and fish. Coral reefs provided shelter for early squid-like creatures and ammonites with their beautiful spiral shells. The oceans teemed with life just as much as the forests did on land. If you could stand on a hill and look out over a Jurassic landscape, you might see all of these pieces at once. A winding river cutting through a green plain, herds of sauropods moving like living mountains across the valley, sharp-toothed predators keeping their distance, waiting for the old or the weak to fall behind, pterosaurs wheeling overhead, their shadows flickering across the forest floor, and beyond the trees, the shimmer of a warm, shallow sea catching the sun as it lapped at new sandy shores. In this world, the dinosaurs truly found room to grow. The warm climate, rich plant life, and scattered islands and valleys all came together to give them a place where they could thrive. It was the perfect recipe for evolution to run wild. Small hunters and gentle grazers would become giants. Feathered creatures would one day take flight. The earth itself, with its shifting continents and green, humid heart, made sure the stage was always set for life to find new ways to flourish. And so, under the Jurassic sun, the age of dinosaurs moved into its grandest chapter yet. The rise of the giants, sauropods. If there is one image that comes to mind when most people hear the word dinosaur, it is often the long-necked giant, slowly moving through a misty forest, its head lifted high among the treetops. These were the sauropods, the true titans of the Jurassic world. They were not only the largest dinosaurs, but also some of the largest animals ever to walk the earth. In the warm, wet climate of the Jurassic, lush forests and vast floodplains spread out across the continents, providing the perfect buffet for these enormous plant eaters. Among the best known are Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, and Diplodocus, names that echo through every museum and children's book. But how did they grow so massive, and what was life like for these gentle giants? Let us begin with Apatosaurus, whose name means deceptive lizard. Apatosaurus was not deceptive in any tricky sense, but was named because early fossil hunters confused parts of its bones with other dinosaurs. It could grow up to 75 feet long and weigh as much as several elephants stacked together. Its long, whip-like tail trailed behind its powerful legs, and its neck stretched out like a flexible bridge into the canopy above. Diplodocus, which lived at about the same time, was just as remarkable. Its name means double beam, referring to the unique bones beneath its tail that made it strong yet light. Diplodocus was one of the longest dinosaurs, stretching out nearly 90 feet from nose to tail. Imagine standing at its front feet and not being able to see its tail through the misty ferns. Brachiosaurus, however, took things in a slightly different direction. While Apatosaurus and Diplodocus held their necks mostly parallel to the ground, Brachiosaurus lifted its neck high like a giraffe on steroids. Its front legs were longer than its back legs, giving its body a gentle upward slope. This unique design allowed Brachiosaurus to reach leaves and branches other dinosaurs could not, giving it access to food high in the treetops. Some Brachiosaurus individuals may have reached heights of over 40 feet, taller than many modern buildings. So how did these giants get so big? One key lay in their bones. Sauropods had lightweight, air-filled bones, much like modern birds. This made their skeletons strong, but not too heavy to carry around. Their long necks were supported by a system of ligaments and muscles that acted like suspension bridges, distributing the weight and helping them lift their heads without using too much energy. Their massive size was not just about reaching high branches, it also helped them stay safe. Few predators would dare attack an adult sauropod. Even the fiercest Jurassic hunters had to think twice before challenging a herd of giants. Their sheer bulk made them walking fortresses, and like modern elephants, sauropods likely found safety in numbers. Fossil trackways show evidence of herds moving together across ancient plains and river valleys. These footprints reveal young sauropods traveling alongside adults, suggesting that they may have lived in family groups that cared for their young and protected them from danger. Their daily lives probably revolved around eating a lot. Some scientists estimate that a single adult sauropod may have needed to consume hundreds of pounds of vegetation every day just to keep moving. Imagine the sound of a herd passing by, the deep rumble of footsteps, the soft crack of branches, the slow tearing of leaves from treetops. Over time, these massive grazers shaped entire landscapes. Their constant feeding created clearings and forests, opened pathways for smaller animals, and helped spread plant seeds far and wide through their droppings. Their long tails may have served more than one purpose, too. Some paleontologists believe that certain sauropods could crack their tails like whips to defend themselves or communicate with one another. Others think tails helped with balance as they moved their necks from side to side while foraging. Even today, standing before a towering skeleton of Apatosaurus or Brachiosaurus in a museum can make you feel small in the best way. It is a reminder that life can stretch and grow to sizes that seem impossible. In the warm cradle of the Jurassic world, the rise of these giants tells a story, not just of size, but of balance, community, and survival on a scale that is hard to fully imagine. These titans were nature's slow-moving architects, reshaping forests and plains wherever their herds roamed. Under the watchful sun of the Jurassic, they were kings and queens of a green, endless world, quiet giants that left footprints bigger than many cars, and a legacy that still makes us look up in wonder. Wherever you find herds of giant plant eaters, you will always find something watching from the shadows. In the Jurassic, the forests and floodplains were no exception, as sauropods like Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, and Brachiosaurus rose to towering sizes. The meat eaters of this ancient world had to find new ways to hunt and survive alongside them. The result was a remarkable branch of evolution that gave us some of the most skilled and fearsome predators of their time, including the iconic Allosaurus and its close cousins. Allosaurus was not the biggest carnivore to ever walk the earth, but it was certainly one of the best suited for its time. Living around 150 million years ago, this predator was the top hunter in many Jurassic ecosystems of what is now North America. Allosaurus could grow up to 30 feet long, with a large skull filled with sharp, serrated teeth, perfect for slicing through flesh. Its arms were short compared to its legs, but each hand had 3 strong fingers tipped with curved claws like nature's own can openers. Its body was built for balance and power, strong hind legs for sprinting short distances, and a long, stiff tail that worked like a counterweight to help it turn quickly. But what made Allosaurus and its relatives stand out was not just their teeth and claws, it was how they may have hunted. Fossil sites where Allosaurus bones have been found often reveal a crowded picture, dozens of bones from plant eaters like Stegosaurus and giant sauropods, mixed in with teeth and bones from Allosaurus itself. This evidence suggests that these predators did not hunt alone. Many paleontologists believe that Allosaurus may have been a social hunter, working in loose groups to bring down prey, much larger than any one predator could handle alone. Imagine a small group of Allosaurus stalking a herd of sauropods at dawn. The young and the old in the herd would have been the easiest targets. A well-timed charge could scatter the herd, isolating the weakest member. Strong jaws and claws would do the rest. This kind of hunting may not have looked like the well-organized packs of wolves today, but even a simple cooperative approach would have given these predators a big advantage. The fossil record shows hints of these ancient battles. Paleontologists have found sauropod bones with deep gouges and bite marks that match the teeth of Allosaurus. Some bones even show signs of healing, which means the giant plant eaters sometimes escaped their attackers and lived to grow massive scars. One famous fossil of Stegosaurus has a deep U-shaped bite wound on one of its plates, a perfect match for the jaws of Allosaurus. It is a silent record of predator and prey, locked in an endless contest of survival. Allosaurus was not alone in this arms race. Other predators evolved alongside it, each filling a slightly different niche. Ceratosaurus, for example, had a smaller build and a distinctive horn on its snout. Its slender shape suggests it may have hunted smaller dinosaurs, fish, or even scavenged carcasses left behind by larger predators. Torvosaurus, another Jurassic hunter, was even bigger than Allosaurus in some regions and had massive teeth designed for tearing through thick hides. Together, these carnivores shaped the behavior of the giant plant eaters they hunted. Sauropod herds likely stayed close together for protection, using sheer numbers to reduce the chances of being picked off by prowling meat eaters. The youngest sauropods probably stayed in the middle of the herd, shielded by layers of larger bodies. Even the mighty Stegosaurus, with its plates and spiked tail, shows signs of having evolved defenses to deal with these persistent hunters. Fossils reveal that Stegosaurus tails could swing with bone-breaking force, a reminder that these prey animals were not as defenseless as they might look. In the end, the story of Jurassic predators like Allosaurus is one of balance. The rise of enormous plant eaters created opportunities and challenges for the meat eaters that followed. To thrive, predators had to grow smarter, faster, and more adaptable. Every footprint pressed into the soft mud of ancient floodplains told a story of life and death, chase and escape, loss and survival. Standing in a museum today, it is easy to see the skeleton of an Allosaurus and imagine it as a monster. But in its time, it was just an animal trying to find its next meal, playing its part in the vast connected web of life. Under the humid forests and open plains of the Jurassic world, predators like Allosaurus and its friends were proof that nature always finds new ways to balance the scales between hunter and hunted, a dance as old as life itself. 10 stray, Stegosaurs and armor-plated wonders. In a world filled with towering long-necked giants and sharp-toothed predators like Allosaurus, some dinosaurs found survival, not in speed or size, but in protection. Among the most iconic of these ancient armor-plated wonders was Stegosaurus, a creature that still captures imaginations today with its row of bony plates and that spiked tail ready to swing like a medieval mace. Stegosaurus lived during the late Jurassic, sharing its forests and floodplains with some of the largest creatures to ever walk the land. But compared to the enormous sauropods, Stegosaurus was surprisingly modest in size. An adult could grow up to around 30 feet long, but much of that was tail. Its body was squat and sturdy, supported by 4 strong legs that held it close to the ground. It moved slowly, likely never needing to outrun a predator, but always ready to stand its ground if one came too close. What made Stegosaurus stand out, then and now, was its unique suit of armor. Along its back, running from neck to tail, were 2 rows of large upright plates that looked almost like ancient shingles or giant leaves turned to stone. Some plates could reach over 2 feet tall and were covered in grooves and blood vessel channels. At the end of its tail were 4 long, sharp spikes, each capable of delivering a powerful blow to anything foolish enough to get within reach. But why did Stegosaurus grow these plates in the first place? For many years, paleontologists have wondered about their true purpose. One popular theory is that the plates helped protect Stegosaurus from predators like Allosaurus and Ceratosaurus. While the plates were not as hard or thick as the bony armor found in some other dinosaurs, they may have made Stegosaurus look larger and more intimidating, discouraging an attacker from risking a painful tail swing. Another idea is that these plates were more about communication than defense. Some scientists believe the plates could have been used for display, like a built-in billboard on the dinosaur's back. The plates were full of blood vessels, which suggests that Stegosaurus may have been able to flush them with blood, changing their color slightly to attract a mate or warn off a rival. A line of tall, bright plates rising above the ferns would have made quite a sight, a slow-moving sign that said in dinosaur language, "I am strong, healthy, and not to be messed with." Beyond protection and display, there is another theory: temperature control. The Jurassic world could be warm and humid, and for a bulky animal with a small brain and a heavy body, staying cool would have been important. The idea goes that the plates acted like giant radiators. As blood flowed through the channels inside each plate, heat could have been released into the air, helping Stegosaurus keep its body temperature steady while it wandered from sunlit clearings to shady forests. Some scientists support this idea, while others think the plates were simply too small to make much of a difference. Still, it is fascinating to think that these ancient creatures may have used their armor as a natural air conditioning system. The tail spikes, sometimes called the thagomizer, thanks to a joke that stuck, were another layer of defense. Fossil evidence shows that these spikes were not just for show. Paleontologists have found Allosaurus bones with puncture wounds that match the size and shape of Stegosaurus spikes. This tells us that when threatened, Stegosaurus could swing its tail with surprising force and accuracy. It may have moved slowly on 4 legs, but its tail could lash out in an instant, landing a hit hard enough to break bones. Stegosaurus was not the only armored wonder of its time, but it remains one of the most famous. Its family, the Stegosaurs, included other species spread across ancient lands that would become North America, Europe, Africa, and Asia. Each one had its own version of plates and spikes, shaped by millions of years of quiet trial and error. It is humbling to imagine these creatures moving through Jurassic forests. Herds of long-necked sauropods grazed high above. Predators like Allosaurus stalked through the underbrush, and in the middle of it all was Stegosaurus, a living fortress, slow but steady, built not for the chase but for survival. Its plates caught the sun as it passed through clearings, its tail swayed behind like a loaded slingshot, ready for anything. In the fossil beds of places like Colorado and Wyoming, their bones rest together still, spines, plates, and tail spikes frozen in stone. A reminder that sometimes nature's best answer is not speed or size, but the simple promise of being too well defended to take down without a fight. And so, with each step across the ancient floodplains, the armored wonders like Stegosaurus left behind not just footprints, but clues to how the age of dinosaurs was more than just giants and hunters. It was a world full of quiet, unexpected ways to survive. By the time the Jurassic forests were alive with the footsteps of giant sauropods and the rumble of hunters like Allosaurus, another quieter experiment was unfolding in the shadows. It was not about armor or enormous size. Instead, it was about something soft, light, and strangely beautiful. This was the beginning of feathers, one of nature's cleverest inventions, first appearing long before the world saw its first true bird. Today, it is easy to think of feathers as something only birds have. We see them in the bright plumage of parrots or the soaring wings of hawks. But millions of years before any modern bird flapped into the sky, tiny dinosaurs were already growing the first simple feathers on their skin. The earliest feathers were not meant for flight at all. They likely began as thin, hair-like filaments, more like fuzzy down than sleek quills. Their first job was to help keep these small dinosaurs warm. In the warm but sometimes unpredictable Jurassic climate, even a little extra insulation could make a big difference. Small theropods, the group of meat-eating dinosaurs that includes raptors and eventually birds, would have benefited from something to hold in body heat. Feathers trapped warm air close to the skin, acting like a natural blanket. This meant these early feathered dinosaurs could stay active longer, hunt at cooler times of day, or explore shady forests where other reptiles might have slowed down. But feathers turned out to be good for more than warmth. Over time, evolution found new uses for them. Some species developed more complex feathers, branching out from simple fuzz into shapes that could catch the light. Brightly colored feathers may have helped these small dinosaurs signal to each other. A flash of color along the tail or arms could warn rivals to stay away, attract a mate, or even confuse a predator for a moment, long enough to dart away into the underbrush. One of the most famous fossils that shows just how far this experiment went is Archaeopteryx, discovered in the limestone quarries of Germany in the 19th century. Archaeopteryx has often been called the first bird. When its delicate bones were first pulled from the rock, people could hardly believe their eyes. It had teeth in its mouth, a long bony tail, and claws on its wings, all classic signs of a dinosaur. Yet its fossil also preserved clear imprints of flight feathers spread along its arms and tail. Here, in one ancient animal, we see a snapshot of evolution caught in the act. Archaeopteryx was not large, about the size of a crow, but its wings were well developed. Did it fly like a sparrow, flapping through the canopy, or did it glide from tree to tree, fluttering down like a feathered squirrel? Paleontologists still debate this. What we do know is that it could at least manage short bursts of flight or long glides, using its feathers to control its movement through the air. It was not yet a modern bird, but it was a giant step toward what birds would one day become. Archaeopteryx was not alone. Other small theropods were experimenting with feathers and flight in different ways. Some, like Anchiornis and Microraptor, had feathers not only on their arms, but also along their legs and tails. Fossils show that Microraptor may have had 4 feathered limbs, giving it a strange, dragonfly-like appearance as it glided between ancient trees. This hints that early flight did not follow a single straight path. Nature tried many versions, mixing feathers and limbs in all sorts of ways. These early experiments show us that flight did not appear overnight. It was a slow, patient process. First came the fuzz for warmth, then colors and patterns for show, then longer, stiffer feathers that could catch the air. Along the way, small muscles and strong shoulder bones evolved to help flap or steer. Claws on wings, tails for balance, all parts that would be reshaped and trimmed down over millions of years until true birds finally emerged. It is humbling to think that every songbird or pigeon we see today carries the legacy of these tiny, feathered dinosaurs. Feathers started as a simple tool to keep warm. They ended up giving Earth the gift of flight. In the quiet dawn of the Jurassic forests, as giant sauropods grazed below and hunters prowled the shadows, small feathered shapes flitted between branches, testing the air and learning what wings could do. Long before the first bird ever sang, the first feathers had already set the stage for the skies to come alive. While the forests and floodplains of the Jurassic were ruled by towering sauropods and sharp-toothed hunters, and while small feathered dinosaurs were just starting to test out the secrets of flight, there was another group that had already mastered the skies long before any true bird ever did. These were the pterosaurs, the first vertebrates to truly take to the air. For millions of years, they glided and soared above the ancient world, watching over rivers, coastlines, and fern-filled clearings from heights no dinosaur could reach. If you were standing in a Jurassic clearing and looked up through the tall conifers, you might catch sight of Dimorphodon flapping its broad wings overhead. Dimorphodon was one of the earliest known pterosaurs, with a wingspan of about 4 feet. Its name means two-formed tooth, a nod to its unusual mouth that held both long, pointed teeth at the front for snatching fish or insects, and smaller teeth in the back for chewing its catch. Dimorphodon's head was large compared to its body, giving it an almost comical appearance, but it was a skilled flyer. Its wings were made of a membrane stretched from an extra-long fourth finger all the way down to its ankle. Unlike birds whose feathers create lift, pterosaurs relied on this skin-like membrane, which could be folded, stretched, or angled to catch the wind just right. Another well-known pterosaur from the Jurassic skies was Rhamphorhynchus. With its long, narrow wings and distinctive tail ending in a diamond-shaped vein, Rhamphorhynchus was built for maneuvering over ancient lagoons and shallow seas. Its wingspan could reach up to 5 feet, making it larger than a modern gull. Fossils show that its jaws were filled with needle-sharp teeth that angled forward, perfect for grasping slippery fish. Some scientists think Rhamphorhynchus may have hunted by skimming close to the water's surface, snapping up prey in quick, sudden strikes. The success of pterosaurs was not only in how they flew, but in how they adapted to so many different ways of life. Some species were tiny, no bigger than a sparrow, flitting through the trees and catching insects on the wing. Others would grow into giants with wingspans longer than a bus, though these would come much later in the Cretaceous. In the Jurassic, the skies were already a busy place. Pterosaurs nested on rocky cliffs and along the shores of ancient seas. They likely used their claws to scramble up tree trunks or cliff faces when launching themselves into the wind. Their bones tell us just how specialized they were for life in the air. Pterosaur skeletons were incredibly lightweight, with bones full of air pockets that made them strong but easy to lift. Their breastbones or sternums were large and keeled, providing an anchor point for powerful flight muscles. This design is similar to what we see in modern birds, but remember, pterosaurs were not birds. They were their own branch of the reptile family tree, cousins to dinosaurs, but never quite the same. Some pterosaurs, like Dimorphodon, had strong legs and claws, which hints they may have been decent climbers and walkers when on the ground. Others, like Rhamphorhynchus, had more slender builds, showing they probably spent most of their time soaring and diving over water. Their eyes were large and well developed, giving them sharp vision to spot prey from high above or in dim light near dawn and dusk. Fossil beds from the Jurassic reveal just how widespread and varied these creatures were. Some sites show entire flocks preserved together, suggesting that pterosaurs may have lived and hunted in groups, much like seabirds today. Others reveal nests and delicate bones of hatchlings, tiny replicas of the adults that must have learned to flap and glide almost as soon as they could walk. What makes pterosaurs so remarkable is how early they figured out flight. Millions of years before any feathered dinosaur launched itself from a branch, pterosaurs were already mastering updrafts and sea breezes, riding thermal currents to travel long distances with minimal effort. Their wings, their hollow bones, and their keen senses all combined into an animal perfectly tuned for the skies. As you picture a Jurassic landscape, do not forget to look up, beyond the shadows of sauropod necks and the rustle of ferns, above the watchful eyes of hunters below. The pterosaurs ruled the air. They were the first to claim the wind as their highway, gliding over a green, humid world that was constantly changing, though they would one day vanish, leaving no living descendants behind. Their legacy remains every time we look at the sky and imagine what it must have been like when reptiles with wings cast their shadows over dinosaurs, forests, and seas. In a world of giants and teeth, the pterosaurs remind us that sometimes the greatest freedom comes from simply learning how to lift off the ground and go wherever the wind will carry you. By the time the Jurassic Age gave way to the Cretaceous, the Earth had already been a dinosaur world for more than 50 million years. But far from slowing down, life was about to get even busier. The Cretaceous period, which lasted from about 145 to 66 million years ago, would become the peak of the dinosaurs' reign, a time of giants and predators, but also of remarkable new changes that reshaped land, sea, and sky. One of the biggest transformations was what was happening deep beneath Earth's crust. The supercontinents that had begun to split apart during the Jurassic now drifted even further from each other. Laurasia in the north and Gondwana in the south continued to crack and shift, creating new oceans and islands. Imagine looking at a map of the Cretaceous and seeing familiar shapes begin to emerge. The Atlantic Ocean was widening, slowly pushing North America away from Europe and Africa. India was drifting on its own course toward Asia. Australia and Antarctica were breaking free from their southern anchor. These slow but steady movements reshaped the coastlines, forming long, shallow seas that crept over low-lying land. With so many new coastlines and inland seas, Earth's climate stayed warm and humid. There were no polar ice caps, so sea levels were much higher than today. In some places, ancient seas flooded right into the heart of continents. North America, for example, was split by a vast inland sea known as the Western Interior Seaway. This shallow sea stretched from the Gulf of Mexico all the way up to what is now the Arctic Ocean, turning the middle of the continent into a giant watery highway filled with marine life. It was a world of warm currents, gentle waves, and islands scattered like stepping stones. For dinosaurs, these seas created natural barriers. Populations that once roamed together were now separated, giving evolution new playgrounds to work in. Isolated dinosaurs slowly changed and adapted to the unique climates and foods of their regions, growing into strange and wonderful forms. But it was not just the land and sea that were shifting. The plant world was changing too, in a quiet revolution that would affect every living thing that depended on green leaves for food and shelter. Before the Cretaceous, Earth's forests were mostly made up of ancient plant groups like cycads, ginkgos, conifers, and giant ferns. These plants were tough and well suited to the warm, wet conditions, but they were not exactly efficient at spreading their seeds. Most relied on wind or slow-moving water to carry pollen and spores from one plant to another. Then, something remarkable happened. Flowering plants appeared for the first time. Known to scientists as angiosperms, these new plants added color, scent, and a whole new layer of complexity to the Cretaceous world. Flowers were not just pretty decorations, they were evolutionary game changers. By producing nectar and colorful petals, flowering plants attracted insects and small animals to help move pollen from bloom to bloom. This partnership meant that flowers could spread faster and more precisely than ferns or conifers ever could. The rise of flowering plants transformed entire ecosystems. As they spread across plains and forests, they created new sources of food. Fruits, seeds, and nectar fed insects, which in turn fed small reptiles, early birds, and mammals. Herbivorous dinosaurs, which had spent millions of years munching tough ferns and conifer needles, now had a fresh, more nutritious menu. Some groups evolved specialized teeth and jaws to crop flowering shrubs and chew softer leaves. Others grew beaks that could nip off buds and fruits. This botanical revolution made the world more colorful and diverse, buzzing with insects that would have seemed out of place in the earlier Jurassic forests. The spread of flowers did more than feed insects and small creatures. It also helped stabilize soils, shape river valleys, and create open meadows alongside thick forests. These new habitats offered dinosaurs more places to live, hide, and hunt. Predator and prey adapted together, always pushing each other in an endless cycle of change. From the warm shallows of the western interior seaway to the flowering plains of Asia and the drifting islands of what would become Europe, the Cretaceous was a world alive with motion. Dinosaurs grew stranger and more specialized. Fish and marine reptiles thrived in new seas. Birds, still closely tied to their dinosaur ancestors, flapped through forests now dappled with colorful blossoms. When we imagine the age of dinosaurs, it is easy to think only of the giant teeth and thunderous footsteps, but the peak of their story was also a time of petals and pollen, of drifting continents and rising tides. It was a world in bloom, a reminder that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with a roar, but with the quiet unfolding of a single flower under an ancient sun. Ceratopsians, horned heavyweights, your port saint for the pinja de torn, halfvol, tadridosop de trif uperxiant. By the time the Cretaceous world had blossomed into a place of flowering plants, warm inland seas, and drifting continents, dinosaurs had reached the peak of their diversity. Among the most striking creatures to appear in these lush landscapes were the ceratopsians, the horned heavyweights of the dinosaur age. With their massive skulls, elaborate frills, and impressive horns, they were walking fortresses and living billboards all at once. When people think of these dinosaurs, one name often stands out: Triceratops. It is one of the last and most famous ceratopsians ever to walk the earth. Triceratops lived in what is now North America, around 68 to 66 million years ago, right at the tail end of the dinosaur era. It shared its world with other well-known giants like Tyrannosaurus rex. But unlike the towering meat-eaters that hunted on two legs, Triceratops was built for defense and stability. It was about the size of a large truck, weighing as much as 12 tons and stretching up to 30 feet from nose to tail. What made Triceratops and its relatives so remarkable was their skulls. Triceratops had a head that could span over 8 feet long. Its huge frill extended back from its skull, forming a bony shield that protected its neck and shoulders. 2 long brow horns jutted from above its eyes, while a shorter nose horn pointed forward like a warning sign. Altogether, its head looked like a combination of armor and crown, designed to impress and intimidate. Triceratops was not alone in this. The Ceratopsian family tree is full of incredible variety. Some species, like Styracosaurus, had frills bristling with long spikes that made them look like living battle tanks. Others, like Pachyrhinosaurus, had thick, bumpy bosses of bone on their noses instead of sharp horns. Each species carried its own version of these dramatic head shields, shaped by millions of years of quiet experiments in survival and showmanship. But what were these frills and horns really for? For years, paleontologists debated whether they were purely for defense or if they had other jobs to do. There is no doubt that the horns could have been formidable weapons. A swipe of those sharp brow horns could leave a predator like Tyrannosaurus nursing painful wounds, but many scientists now believe the frills were more than just shields. They may have been used for display, much like a peacock's tail or a deer's antlers today. Blood vessels ran through these large frills, which means they could have flushed with color, sending visual signals to other members of the herd. A bright, healthy frill could show strength and health, helping individuals attract mates or warn rivals to back off. Some frills even had holes or windows in the bone, making them lighter without losing their dramatic shapes. Evidence from fossil sites suggests that ceratopsians were not just solitary wanderers, but social animals that likely lived and moved in herds. In places like Montana and Alberta, paleontologists have uncovered bone beds containing the remains of dozens of ceratopsians buried together. These ancient graveyards hint at herd behavior and possibly even complex social structures. Young and old were found side by side, suggesting that these dinosaurs cared for their young and perhaps even looked out for each other when predators were near. Imagine a Cretaceous plain dotted with flowering plants and scattered groves of trees. A herd of Triceratops moves through the undergrowth, heads low as they crop ferns and shrubs with beak-like mouths. Their massive bodies rustle through the bushes, the air alive with the occasional bellow or low rumble as they communicate with one another. At the edge of the herd, calves stay close to the larger adults, protected by a wall of horns and frills, ready to defend them from any predator daring enough to test their luck. These horned heavyweights were not just armored brutes. Their fossils show they were likely adaptable, resourceful, and maybe even playful at times. Some skulls bear the scars of healed wounds, hinting at clashes with rivals or narrow escapes from predators. Others show signs of bone infections or injuries, a reminder that even the best armor could not protect them from every threat. In the final chapters of the Age of Dinosaurs, the Ceratopsians stood out as some of the most dramatic examples of how life can evolve in wonderful and unexpected ways. Their giant heads, social lives, and herds roaming ancient floodplains remind us that dinosaurs were more than just teeth and claws. They were communities, families, and living testaments to the power of adaptation and resilience. When we look at their fossilized skulls today, it is easy to imagine them not as monsters, but as strong, proud herds moving under the warm Cretaceous sun, horned giants leaving behind footprints that would last for millions of years. In a world where sharp teeth and claws often decided who ate and who got eaten, some dinosaurs chose a different path to survival. Instead of running fast or growing tall, they became living tanks, low to the ground, covered in thick armor, and armed with one of the most unusual weapons in the dinosaur arsenal. These were the ankylosaurs, the armored wonders of the Cretaceous age. Picture an ankylosaur moving through a sun-dappled Cretaceous forest. It is not towering like a sauropod or swift like a raptor. Instead, it keeps close to the ground, its wide body swinging gently from side to side as it waddles through the ferns. Its back is a fortress of bone, heavy plates and knobs that fit together like a natural suit of armor. Each piece is covered in a rough, pebbly surface, perfect for deflecting bites and claws. The most famous of these armored giants is Ankylosaurus itself, whose name means fused lizard. Ankylosaurus lived near the very end of the dinosaur age, around 68 to 66 million years ago, and it remains one of the best examples of how effective armor can be. It could grow up to 25 feet long and weigh as much as a small bus. Its body was wide and low, like a walking boulder, with sturdy legs that carried all that heavy protection wherever it went. What made ankylosaurs truly special, though, was not just the armor on their backs, but what they carried at the end of their tails. Many ankylosaurs had massive tail clubs, a knot of solid bone that could swing side to side like a sledgehammer. Imagine being a predator, perhaps even a fearsome Tyrannosaurus, trying to sneak up on an ankylosaur. One wrong move, one misjudged step, and that club could come crashing down on your shin bone or jaw with bone-breaking force. Fossil evidence tells us these tail clubs were not just for show. Some bones of large meat eaters have been found with injuries that match the size and shape of an ankylosaur's tail club. This means these heavy hitters did not just rely on their armor to sit and wait out trouble. They fought back when cornered. A single swing could shatter bones and send even the boldest predator limping away to find an easier meal. But protection did not stop with the back and tail. Ankylosaurs had armored eyelids, bony plates on their cheeks, and thick, muscular necks that made it hard for any attacker to find a weak spot. Even their bellies, usually softer in other dinosaurs, were often protected by smaller, tightly packed bony nodules. They were the full package of passive and active defense, a reminder that nature can be just as creative in defense as it is in offense. Despite all this armor, ankylosaurs were not mindless tanks stomping through the underbrush. They were peaceful plant eaters who spent most of their time low to the ground, nibbling ferns, cycads, and low shrubs. Their wide, beak-like mouths were perfect for cropping tough plants. Some fossils show that their teeth were small and leaf-shaped, arranged in rows that could handle fibrous greens, but not much else. They did not need sharp teeth because they did not chase or hunt. Their strength was in their patience and their natural fortress. Ankylosaurs roamed what is now North America, Asia, and even parts of Europe. Some species, like Euoplocephalus, had more slender builds with rows of spikes along their sides, while others, like Cychonia from Mongolia, had thicker armor plates and broad tails. Each species carried its own unique pattern of bony protection, shaped by the predators it faced and the environments it called home. What makes ankylosaurs so fascinating is how they show that in the ancient dance between predator and prey, there is always more than one way to survive. Where some dinosaurs grew bigger teeth or sharper claws, ankylosaurs turned inward, building a fortress on their own backs. They remind us that defense can be just as remarkable as attack, that a slow, steady life, protected by plates and a swinging tail, can carry you through millions of years. In the fossil beds where their remains rest today, their armor is still intact, each plate and knob frozen in stone like a puzzle of ancient resilience. To stand before an ankylosaur skeleton in a museum is to see a story written in bone, a story about a dinosaur that did not run or hide, but faced its world head-on, ready for whatever came out of the shadows. The next time you imagine the age of dinosaurs, remember the living tanks that moved quietly through forests and floodplains, leaving behind not just footprints, but the echo of a lesson that strength is not always about being the fastest or the fiercest. Sometimes it is about being strong enough to stand your ground. Hadrosaurs, duck-billed socialites. By the time the Cretaceous was in full bloom, the world was alive with every shape and size of dinosaur you could imagine. Towering sauropods still wandered through ancient forests, and horned giants like Triceratops guarded their herds on the plains. Yet among all these giants, one group quietly rose to become some of the most successful and widespread dinosaurs ever to walk the earth, the hadrosaurs, better known as the duck-billed dinosaurs. At first glance, a hadrosaur might not seem all that impressive. They were mostly medium to large-sized herbivores with long tails, sturdy legs, and that signature flattened beak-like snout that earned them the nickname duck-billed. But take a closer look, and you will see that these gentle giants were some of the most fascinating and adaptable dinosaurs of their time. One of the secrets to their success was hidden inside their mouths. Unlike many plant-eating dinosaurs that simply bit off leaves and swallowed them whole, hadrosaurs carried an incredible set of tools in their jaws. They had what paleontologists call a dental battery, rows upon rows of tightly packed teeth that formed a complex grinding surface. Some species had hundreds of teeth, with new ones always waiting to replace old, worn-out ones. This meant a hadrosaur could chew tough, fibrous plants much more efficiently than other dinosaurs. They did not just gulp down leaves, they ground them into pulp, unlocking more nutrients from every bite. This remarkable mouth design let them eat a wide variety of plants, from ferns to flowering shrubs, helping them thrive in many different environments. Hadrosaurs were not just built for eating well, they were also great at communicating. Some species grew elaborate crests on their heads, each shaped like a unique trumpet. Think of Parasaurolophus with its long backward curving tube rising from the back of its skull. Inside that crest were hollow passages connected to its nasal passages. Many scientists believe these crests worked like natural musical instruments. When air passed through them, they could produce low, resonant calls that echoed across the landscape. These sounds might have helped individuals recognize each other, warn the herd of danger, or call to their young. Some crests were short and blunt, while others curled and twisted like ancient horns. Each species carried its own song. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about hadrosaurs was not in their teeth or their crests, but in how they lived together. Fossil sites across North America, Asia, and Europe have revealed clear signs that hadrosaurs were social animals that moved in herds. In some places, entire bone beds have been uncovered with the remains of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of hadrosaurs buried together. These ancient mass gatherings suggest they traveled in large groups, sticking close for protection and cooperation. Herd life offered many benefits. A single hadrosaur might be vulnerable to a hungry predator like a tyrannosaur, but in a herd the odds shifted. Adults could position themselves on the edges, keeping calves and weaker individuals safe in the center. A watchful herd could spot danger sooner and move together to find fresh food and water when seasons changed. Nesting sites give us even more clues about how devoted these dinosaurs were to each other. Some fossil beds show entire nesting grounds where hadrosaurs returned year after year building their nests close together like seabirds do today. Fossilized nests filled with eggs and hatchlings show that they likely laid their eggs in shallow pits lined with plants. Incredibly, some fossils even hint that hatchlings stayed in the nest for a while, cared for by attentive parents who brought them food and guarded them until they were strong enough to join the herd. Imagine standing on a Cretaceous floodplain at dawn. The air is warm, filled with the low hum of insects. A herd of hadrosaurs grazes nearby, heads dipping down to pull up mouthfuls of lush ferns and flowering plants. A mother gently nudges her hatchlings toward the safety of the group. Off in the distance, a Parasaurolophus lifts its head and lets out a long echoing call through its crest, a deep sound that carries across the plains. Others lift their heads in response, a wave of calls and movement flowing through the herd like a living tide. These duck-billed socialites were more than just food for predators. They were complex creatures with strong family ties, clever adaptations, and a way of life built around community and cooperation. Their fossils remind us that life in the age of dinosaurs was not only about the biggest teeth or the heaviest armor. Sometimes survival belonged to those who stayed together, looked out for their young, and learned to thrive as a group in a changing world. And when we look at their tracks and nesting sites today, we can almost hear their gentle calls drifting through ancient fields, the voices of dinosaurs who knew that sometimes there is strength in numbers and safety in the simple act of sticking close to one another. Theropods, from raptors to T-Rex, from raptors to T-Rex, If you ever visit a natural history museum, you will likely find yourself staring up at a giant skeleton with jaws wide open and teeth like knives. That is Tyrannosaurus rex, the most famous predator the world has ever known. But long before T-Rex became the star of movies and books, its family tree was full of other remarkable meat-eaters that roamed forests, plains, and coastal valleys for millions of years. From nimble raptors to the bone-crushing king itself, the story of the theropods is a story of constant change and fierce competition. Theropods were the classic meat-eating dinosaurs, walking on two powerful legs, balancing their bodies with long tails, and carrying sharp claws and teeth built for tearing flesh. They appeared early in the dinosaur timeline, but it was during the Cretaceous that they truly exploded into an astonishing variety of forms. Some were small and feathered, flitting through trees and chasing insects. Others were built like living tanks of muscle and bone, able to bring down prey many times their size. One of the most fascinating branches of this family tree is the raptors, or dromaeosaurs. Picture Velociraptor, not the man-sized monster from the movies, but a smaller, more bird-like creature about the size of a turkey. It was quick, clever, and covered in feathers, with a long, stiff tail for balance and a sickle-shaped claw on each foot. This claw was its secret weapon, able to slash or pin down prey. Fossils from places like Mongolia show Velociraptor might have hunted small animals and even scavenged larger carcasses when the chance came. Some fossil finds even capture these little predators locked in battle with other dinosaurs, claws and teeth frozen mid-strike. The raptors show how adaptable theropods could be. Many dromaeosaurs were skilled pack hunters, working together to bring down prey larger than themselves. Their forward-facing eyes gave them good depth perception, and their brains were relatively large for dinosaurs, suggesting they relied on quick thinking and sharp senses. But not every theropod stayed small. While the raptors tested the limits of speed and teamwork, other meat-eaters grew bigger, bolder, and far more terrifying. Among these giants were the Tyrannosaurs. Early Tyrannosaurs were not the towering predators you might expect. They started small, with long legs and slim builds, likely hunting small prey or scavenging from kills left behind by larger dinosaurs. But over millions of years, something changed. These small hunters evolved into towering apex predators that ruled the late Cretaceous plains. Standing at the top of this line was Tyrannosaurus rex. Living around 68 to 66 million years ago, T-Rex was one of the largest land predators to ever live. It could grow more than 40 feet long and weigh up to 9 tons. Its skull alone could reach 5 feet long, packed with teeth the size of bananas. Each tooth was thick, serrated, and built for crushing bone as well as flesh. Despite its reputation for tiny arms, T-Rex was anything but clumsy. Its powerful hind legs could carry it at surprising speeds for short bursts, while its long, heavy tail helped it balance as it lunged at prey. Its sense of smell was one of the best of any land animal, thanks to huge olfactory bulbs in its brain. This keen nose let it track wounded animals from miles away or sniff out carcasses hidden in dense forests. Fossil evidence paints a picture of a complex predator. Some studies suggest T-Rex may have hunted in small family groups, while others think it was mostly a solitary stalker. Bite marks on bones show that T-Rex did not waste anything. It would crush bones to reach the nutritious marrow inside. Some fossils even show T-Rex teeth embedded in the bones of other T-Rexes, hinting that these giants may have fought each other over food or territory. The rise of T-Rex shows how nature never stops pushing the limits of what is possible. From the small nimble raptors that flitted through undergrowth to the unstoppable force of a fully grown T-Rex, theropods filled every possible niche. They were scavengers, hunters, climbers, and eventually the ancestors of modern birds. Every hawk circling overhead and every sparrow on a fence carries the legacy of these ancient predators. So, the next time you imagine the age of dinosaurs, picture the shadows moving through Cretaceous forests, the quiet rustle of feathers, the sharp glint of a curved claw, and the thunderous footsteps of a giant whose roar might never have echoed like in the movies, but whose presence made the earth tremble. From raptors to T-Rex, the theropods remind us that evolution always finds new ways to test the balance between speed, strength, and survival, and sometimes that story ends with the most iconic predator the world has ever known. By the late Cretaceous, the world was alive with change. The giant sauropods had mostly faded away in many regions, replaced by herds of horned ceratopsians, armored ankylosaurs, and herds of duck-billed hadrosaurs grazing among flowering plants. Predators like Tyrannosaurus rex watched from the shadows, but while these giants ruled the land, a quieter, more delicate revolution was unfolding high above and hidden in the trees. The story of how feathers took over and the first true birds emerged. Long before a modern bird ever flapped its wings, feathers had already become one of nature's most remarkable inventions. Early theropods like Velociraptor carried feathers mainly for warmth and display, but as the Cretaceous went on, more and more species began using feathers in new and clever ways. What started as fuzzy insulation turned into sleek, strong flight feathers. Hollow bones grew lighter, arms stretched out and became wings. And what once was a tiny raptor hiding in the brush could now take to the air to escape predators, hunt insects, or simply glide between ancient trees. One of the best examples of this transition is the story of Ichthyornis. Its name means fish bird, and it lived around 90 million years ago, soaring over the warm, shallow seas that covered much of what is now North America. Ichthyornis looked like a gull at first glance, but a closer look would reveal its place in this ancient experiment. It had a beak lined with teeth something no bird today has, and strong wings built for active flapping flight. Its tail was shorter than its dinosaur cousins, but still longer than that of modern birds. Ichthyornis shows us how evolution was taking steps toward what would become the birds we see now. Imagine standing on the sandy edge of a Cretaceous sea. The waves lap gently against the shore. Overhead, a flock of Ichthyornis dive and wheel, snapping up fish just below the surface with sharp-toothed beaks. They cry out to one another in harsh calls, their wings flashing in the sunlight. These were not quite seagulls, but they filled the same niche, showing how quickly new forms could flourish when they found a way to survive. Another fascinating member of this lineage was Hesperornis. Unlike Ichthyornis, Hesperornis had given up on flight altogether. It lived in the same ancient seas, but found its place underwater instead of in the sky. Hesperornis was long and sleek, with strong legs set far back on its body and tiny, useless wings. It looked more like a strange blend of bird and penguin, though it was not related to penguins at all. Hesperornis could dive and chase fish with powerful kicks of its legs, its teeth snapping shut on slippery prey. Its beak still held rows of backward curving teeth, a reminder of its dinosaur heritage that had not yet faded away. Fossils of these early birds and their close relatives show us how feathers kept changing. They did not just help with flight, they provided warmth, helped parents brood their eggs, and let these creatures blend into forests or dazzle each other with colorful displays. Some early birds likely had plumage as vibrant as any tropical bird we know today, though we will never know exactly what colors they wore. Tiny chemical traces in fossilized feathers give hints of patterns. Dark stripes here, a hint of iridescence there, a soft, ancient rainbow locked away in stone. The spread of feathers and true flight was about more than just escaping danger. It opened new worlds. Trees became highways instead of obstacles. Insects, which had boomed along with flowering plants, became easy prey for small, agile fliers. Early birds could nest in branches far above ground, where most predators could not reach. Eggs and chicks hidden in dense leaves stood a better chance of surviving. Feathers were not just tools, they were freedom. The avian lineage did not appear overnight. It was a slow dance of small changes that added up over millions of years. Stronger breast muscles for flapping, lighter bones for lift, beaks to replace toothed jaws, shorter tails to make flight smoother. Some of these steps were tried and abandoned. Others, like those seen in Ichthyornis and Hesperornis, show nature testing what worked best. And from these experiments came the seeds of every pigeon, hawk, and sparrow that fills our skies today. Next time you hear a bird call outside your window, take a moment to remember where it came from. Its song is a whisper from an age when raptors wore feathers, when tiny creatures tested new ways to conquer the air, and when the descendants of mighty theropods found a way to trade claws and teeth for wings and hollow bones. The age of feathers had begun, and the sky would never be the same again. As the Cretaceous period unfolded with its sprawling inland seas, flowering plants, and all the mighty dinosaurs roaming below, the skies above held their own wonders. Long before any bird took command of the winds, the true rulers of the ancient air were the pterosaurs. By the end of the Cretaceous, some of these remarkable reptiles had grown into the largest flying creatures the world has ever seen. They soared on wingspans longer than a small airplane, casting shadows over coastal plains and inland rivers. Among these giants, one name soars above the rest: Quetzalcoatlus. Quetzalcoatlus is named after the feathered serpent god of ancient Aztec legend, and its name is fitting. Its wings stretched more than 35 feet from tip to tip, longer than a school bus parked across a playground. Standing on the ground, Quetzalcoatlus could look a giraffe in the eye, its long neck and slender head rising above the grasslands. Yet despite its size, it was built for flight, lighter than you might expect for something so enormous. How did a creature like Quetzalcoatlus get off the ground? Its secret lay in a clever mix of power and design. Unlike birds, which launch themselves into the air by flapping their wings or leaping from tree branches, Quetzalcoatlus likely used a powerful four-limbed launch. It folded its wings, crouched low, and then used its strong front limbs like vaulting poles, pushing off the ground in a single explosive leap. This gave it the lift it needed to catch a rising thermal or breeze. Once airborne, it would have sailed across the sky with slow, graceful wing beats, able to cover miles with minimal effort. What did these giants eat as they drifted between ancient rivers and coastal plains? Some scientists believe Quetzalcoatlus was a scavenger, using its keen eyesight and long beak to spot carcasses left behind by other predators like Tyrannosaurus rex. Others think it may have stalked prey like modern storks or herons, walking slowly through open grasslands or shallow riverbanks, using its sharp beak to snatch up small animals, fish, or even baby dinosaurs. Its long, toothless jaws would have been perfect for grabbing and swallowing whole, while some pterosaurs fished by skimming over ocean waves. Quetzalcoatlus seems to have preferred life on land. Its long limbs and sturdy feet suggest it was comfortable striding across open terrain, folding its wings neatly along its sides when not in flight. This made it surprisingly nimble for something so large, a towering sentinel that could wander vast stretches of Cretaceous countryside in search of food. These giant pterosaurs likely returned to nesting sites season after season, although direct fossil evidence of Quetzalcoatlus nesting grounds remains scarce. Clues from smaller pterosaurs hint at what life might have looked like when these giants gathered to raise their young. Some pterosaurs nested in large colonies, with dozens or even hundreds of nests clustered together for protection. Eggs were laid in shallow scrapes, sometimes covered with vegetation for warmth and camouflage. Hatchlings, once emerged, were likely mobile soon after birth, scuttling around on all fours, their tiny wings tucked in as they learned to flap and glide. A hatchling Quetzalcoatlus would have been far from the towering giant it would grow to be. It might have fit in your arms, its wings still short and delicate, covered in a fuzz-like coating that helped keep it warm. These little ones had to grow quickly, feeding on insects and small prey until their wings grew strong enough to carry them into the sky alongside their parents. Once airborne, they joined a lineage that had mastered the air for more than 100 million years. It is humbling to stand on Earth today and imagine the skies of the Cretaceous. Look up and see not just clouds, but the faint shape of a Quetzalcoatlus gliding silently overhead. Its wings catch the rising thermals, lifting it higher over the coastal plains. Below, herds of horned ceratopsians graze, oblivious to the shadow passing by. In the distance, inland seas sparkle under the sun, and somewhere along their shores, these giants come to rest, folding their wings like ancient paper fans as they stalk the shallows in search of a meal. The legacy of pterosaurs reminds us that flight has always been one of nature's greatest experiments. Birds may rule the skies now, but long before feathers ever caught the wind, the pterosaurs wrote the first chapter of what it means to be truly free in the air. In Quetzalcoatlus and its kin, the story of soaring life reaches its grandest scale, a reminder that even in a world of massive predators and armored giants, the sky was never empty. It was alive with the silent, graceful glide of creatures who dared to rise above it all, riding the wind when the earth below was still a kingdom of dinosaurs. When we picture the age of dinosaurs, it is easy to imagine only the thunder of giant footsteps across warm plains, herds of horned ceratopsians grazing under flowering trees, and feathered raptors darting through ancient ferns. But if you could have traveled back to the Cretaceous and looked beyond the land, you would find an entire other world waiting beneath the waves, a world every bit as dangerous and full of life as anything that walked the earth. For while the dinosaurs ruled the land, the seas belonged to other remarkable reptiles, the mosasaurs, the plesiosaurs, and the ichthyosaurs. Picture the warm, shallow seas that covered much of what is now North America and Europe. Inland seas like the Western Interior Seaway split continents in half, creating coastlines where none exist today. These seas teemed with life. Schools of fish flashed through the clear water, ammonites drifted like ancient squid in coiled shells, and coral reefs blossomed under the sun, and among them swam the marine reptiles, the top predators of this submerged world. Take mosasaurs, for example. These were the undisputed kings of the Cretaceous seas. Imagine a sleek, powerful lizard stretched out to lengths of over 50 feet, its long jaws bristling with sharp, backward curving teeth. Mosasaurs were distant relatives of modern monitor lizards and snakes. But where their cousins stuck to land, mosasaurs returned to the water in grand style. They developed paddle-like limbs and a long, powerful tail that let them slice through the ocean with speed and agility. Some species, like Mosasaurus itself, could ambush prey with sudden bursts of speed, jaws snapping shut around fish, turtles, or even other marine reptiles. They were not gentle giants. Fossil stomach contents reveal mosasaurs ate anything they could catch, including smaller mosasaurs. Some may have even stolen prey from each other or scavenged the bodies of the unfortunate. Their double-hinged jaws and flexible skulls let them swallow large prey whole, just like modern snakes. While mosasaurs ruled the open seas, plesiosaurs haunted the coastal shallows and deeper waters alike. They looked unlike anything swimming today. Some species, like Elasmosaurus, grew necks so long they looked like a reptilian version of the Loch Ness Monster. Picture a body shaped like a broad, flat turtle, but without a shell, with 4 strong flippers propelling it through the water like underwater wings. Its neck could stretch up to 20 feet, longer than the rest of its body combined. This long neck may have helped it sneak up on schools of fish or reach into tight spaces in reefs. Not all plesiosaurs had giraffe-like necks. The plesiosaurs, their shorter-necked cousins, were built more like underwater bulldogs. They had massive skulls and powerful jaws that could crush prey with bone-snapping force. Kronosaurus, for instance, could grow up to 30 feet long and was a top predator in its own right. Whether long-necked or short, plesiosaurs showed how evolution could experiment with shapes and hunting styles in the oceans just as much as on land. Then there were the ichthyosaurs, the older pioneers of ocean life. By the Cretaceous, their glory days were mostly behind them, but a few still glided through the seas. Ichthyosaurs were sleek and dolphin-like, perfectly adapted for speed. With big eyes suited for hunting in dim underwater light, they chased fish and squid, snapping them up with slender snouts full of sharp teeth. Some fossils show ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the water, much like whales today. The Cretaceous seas were no safe place for the faint-hearted. If you were a fish or a smaller reptile, danger came from every direction. Mosasaurs could appear from the deep, plesiosaurs could rise from the gloom with a sudden snap of their jaws, and ichthyosaurs could strike like living torpedoes. Even the skies above were not safe. Pterosaurs like Pteranodon would swoop down to snatch fish close to the surface. Every inch of the ancient ocean was alive with hunters, prey, and an endless dance for survival. Beneath the waves, these marine reptiles built an empire just as dramatic as the dinosaurs did on land. They remind us that the Mesozoic was not only about what stomped and roared in forests or plains, but also about what swam in the silent blue world under the waves. When we find their fossils today, teeth embedded in ancient seabed limestone, bones locked in stone with the traces of ancient fish still inside, we see a snapshot of this forgotten kingdom. So the next time you stand by the ocean and hear the waves roll in, remember that once out there, giants swam. There were no ships, no nets, no human eyes to watch them glide through prehistoric seas. Only the silent, timeless rhythm of the water and the shadows of reptiles whose reign matched that of any T-Rex on dry land. They were the monsters of the deep, the rulers of the ancient oceans, proof that life will always find a way to fill every corner of this world, above the trees, on the plains, and far below, where sunlight fades into mystery. If you could stand on Earth at the height of the dinosaurs' reign, you would see a world bursting with life, color, and sound at every turn. It was the late Cretaceous, a time when dinosaurs were not just surviving, but thriving in ways that would make any modern ecosystem seem simple by comparison. This was a world at its peak, a planet that had spent millions of years growing forests, seas, plains, and creatures that would fill every corner of the land, sea, and sky. Imagine standing on a wide coastal plain where warm breezes blow through fields of flowering plants. Tall conifers and ferns grow thick along rivers that wind slowly to an inland sea. Here, massive herds of hadrosaurs graze together, their duck-billed heads dipping down to tear at the vegetation. Young hatchlings stick close to their mothers, safe in the middle of the herd, while watchful adults keep an eye out for predators. Every so often, a Parasaurolophus lifts its head and calls through its long, curved crest, a sound like a low, distant horn rolling over the land. Other calls answer from far away, a chorus of voices that drift through the thick summer air. In the distance, a group of Triceratops lumber through the undergrowth, their horns catching the sun as they nudge each other gently or stand shoulder to shoulder against the threat of a lurking Tyrannosaurus rex. You can almost hear the crunch of ferns underfoot, the low rumbles that pass between these horned giants as they communicate in a language long lost to time. Not far from the plains, the forests are alive with smaller creatures. Feathered raptors flit through the trees, hopping from branch to branch as they hunt for insects, mammals, and smaller reptiles. Some, like Microraptor, may glide silently between the trunks, their feathered limbs catching the sunlight for a moment before they vanish back into the green. Early birds, descendants of these feathered hunters, swoop overhead, their wings catching the rising air as they search for berries, seeds, or a quiet place to build a nest. Step further north, and the world surprises you yet again. For a long time, people believed dinosaurs only lived in warm tropical places, but fossil evidence has shown that even the polar regions had their own communities of dinosaurs. Imagine standing in an ancient forest near what is now Alaska or Australia, where summer days stretch long under a gentle sun that never truly sets. Herds of small herbivorous dinosaurs graze among conifer trees. Some may burrow into the ground for warmth during the cold months. Others grow thick, downy feathers that help them endure the chill, living proof that dinosaurs were far more adaptable than we once believed. While the land is teeming with life, the skies are busy too. Pterosaurs, some small and quick like birds, others enormous like Quetzalcoatlus, soar on wide wings. They wheel over coastal cliffs, riding warm thermals and scanning the shallows for fish. Every so often, one dives, its jaws snapping up a meal in a splash before rising again with powerful wing beats. And below the waves, the oceans are no less full. Mosasaurs cruise through the warm seas like living torpedoes, hunting fish and other marine reptiles. Plesiosaurs glide above ancient reefs, long necks weaving through schools of fish. Ammonites drift in gentle currents, their spiral shells glittering in the sunlit shallows. Even deep in the ocean's darker places, ichthyosaurs chase squid-like creatures, their huge eyes adapted to the gloom. All of this life, from the tiniest insect buzzing over a flower to the largest sauropod pushing through a stand of trees, was part of an ancient interconnected web. Plants fed herbivores, herbivores fed predators, and all left their marks in the soil and stone for us to find millions of years later. The earth at its peak was noisy and full. The slap of waves against sandy shores, the crash of giant footsteps through underbrush, the calls of young dinosaurs echoing across the plains. It was not just a world of monsters, but of parents and young, of herds moving like rivers of life across floodplains, of feathery flutters in the treetops, and shadows gliding silently through the sky. Standing in the middle of all of this, you would have felt the deep hum of an ancient world alive in every direction. A world that seemed like it would go on forever, its creatures perfectly shaped by time to fit every forest, swamp, lagoon, and sea. But even at this peak, at this grand moment when dinosaurs filled every continent and the air and seas were alive with wings and fins, change was already on the horizon. The Earth's story, it seems, is never finished, even when it feels most complete. For more than 160 million years, dinosaurs reigned over a world that seemed unstoppable. Herds wandered plains that stretched for miles under warm, dappled sun. Feathery raptors flitted through ancient forests, while giant pterosaurs soared over broad inland seas. From the icy edges of polar forests to the tangled swamps near the equator, life was everywhere, busy and resilient. And yet, all this vibrancy rested on a balance so delicate that one day a single rock from space would tip the scales forever. 66 million years ago, Earth spun under familiar stars just as it does now. Far out beyond the planets, somewhere in the restless belt of asteroids, a massive chunk of rock drifted on its lonely path. For millions of years, it had circled the sun in silence. But its course shifted, nudged by gravitational dances with other celestial bodies, until one day it slipped onto a collision path with Earth. It was about 6 miles wide, but size alone does not tell the story. What mattered was its speed, over 45,000 miles per hour, faster than a bullet, faster than any storm or wind on Earth. It did not slow down as it plunged through space. It tore through the vacuum, growing hotter as it fell into Earth's gravity well. It hit the atmosphere with a fiery roar, so fast and bright that for a moment it would have looked like a second sun streaking across the sky. The place it struck is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Back then, it was a shallow sea brimming with life, coral reefs and gentle waves rolling over limestone beds. The moment the asteroid hit, all of that changed. The Chicxulub impactor, as we now call it, slammed into the Earth with a force greater than 1 billion atomic bombs. In that single instant, more energy was released than any volcano, earthquake, or hurricane the planet has ever known. Imagine the physics of that impact. The asteroid, small in cosmic terms, struck with such power that it blasted a crater more than 90 miles wide and 12 miles deep. Rock vaporized on contact. Seawater exploded into steam. The ground liquefied under the shock wave. Molten rock and ash were thrown high into the atmosphere, some of it launched into space before falling back like deadly rain. Winds raced outward faster than any hurricane, flattening forests thousands of miles away. Earthquakes shook continents that had never felt such violence. Yet the worst was still to come. Fires ignited where molten debris fell back to Earth, setting forests ablaze half a world away from the impact site. Animals that survived the blast faced a landscape that glowed red with burning trees and choked skies, but it was what happened in the atmosphere that sealed the dinosaurs' fate. The impact vaporized enormous amounts of rock rich in sulfur and other minerals. These tiny particles rose high above the clouds, forming a thick blanket that wrapped the planet. Sunlight struggled to break through this dusty veil. Days turned darker, colder, and shorter. Plants withered without sunlight for photosynthesis. As the green foundation of the food chain died, so too did the creatures that relied on it. Herbivores starved first, leaving predators to pick at dwindling remains until they too faced hunger. Temperatures dropped as global climates lurched from a greenhouse world to what some scientists call an impact winter. Acid rain fell, poisoning fresh water and soil. The seas too felt the sting. Phytoplankton, the base of the marine food web, died in vast numbers when sunlight could no longer reach them. Reefs crumbled, and once vibrant coastal shallows fell silent as fish and marine reptiles struggled to survive. Not everything vanished overnight. Some dinosaurs must have watched as the sky darkened and the air grew cold, moving from forest to plain in search of green shoots that never returned. Pterosaurs that once soared over inland seas saw their prey disappear beneath a dark ocean surface. On the ground, the mighty Tyrannosaurus, apex predator of its time, found the plains empty of prey. All around the world, the ripple effects spread. Fires, storms, floods, and a slow, relentless collapse of the life that had filled every corner of the Mesozoic. Only the smallest, most adaptable creatures stood a chance. Tiny mammals that could burrow underground and feed on seeds, insects, or anything left behind. Birds, the smallest and most agile survivors of the dinosaur lineage, carried their ancestors' legacy on feathered wings. So, when you think of the asteroid, do not just picture a single moment of impact, but an entire chain reaction that echoed around the globe. It was not just an explosion, it was a reshaping of the Earth's story, a reminder that sometimes the universe itself becomes the storyteller, leaving behind craters, bones, and a silence that spoke louder than the roar that came before it. In the end, it was this rock from space that turned the page, closing the age of dinosaurs and setting the stage for what would come next. The asteroid struck like a cosmic hammer, but its true power unfolded slowly in the days, weeks, and years that followed. If you could stand on Earth just after the Chicxulub impact, you would find a world that looked familiar, yet terrifyingly different. In place of the lush plains, forested valleys, and warm, shallow seas, there was now a planet staggering under the weight of its worst disaster in millions of years, a world wrapped in fire and darkness. The first shock came in the form of heat. When the asteroid hit, it threw up a vast cloud of molten rock and vaporized Earth that soared out of the crater and fell back through the atmosphere. As this debris re-entered, it created friction so intense that the sky itself seemed to glow. Imagine standing anywhere on Earth and looking up to see streaks of light crisscrossing the sky, brighter than any meteor shower we know today. This rain of fire ignited forests thousands of miles from the crater. Whole continents burned. Even regions that did not catch flame would have smelled the smoke drifting on the winds. But the fires, as devastating as they were only the beginning. The real blow came when the ash and vapor settled into the upper layers of the atmosphere, mixed with the sulfur-rich rocks that had been blasted apart at Chicxulub. These fine particles formed a thick, hazy shroud that wrapped the planet like a dusty blanket. Sunlight, once warm and life-giving, could barely penetrate this veil. Plants that survived the fires now faced an even greater threat, a loss of light. In a few short months, the Earth slipped into what scientists call an impact winter. With sunlight blocked, temperatures plummeted. Regions that had once been lush and warm turned cold and barren. Tropical forests wilted. Flowering plants withered, dropping leaves that never grew back. Ferns, tough and stubborn, tried to hold on, but even they struggled without steady sunlight. The great green carpet that fed the giant herbivores began to disappear. This unraveling of the plant world meant doom for creatures higher up the food chain. The herds of hadrosaurs that once grazed peacefully on open plains now found themselves wandering through empty fields, unable to find enough to eat. Horned ceratopsians and armored ankylosaurs, built to fend off predators, could do nothing against hunger. When the plants died, the herbivores died, and when the herbivores were gone, the predators that depended on them followed. As if the cold and darkness were not enough, the skies also turned deadly in other ways. Rain, once a blessing to the thirsty earth, became acidic. When the asteroid struck, it released sulfur and other minerals that mixed with water vapor, creating acid rain that fell across the globe. Lakes, rivers, and soils were poisoned. Plants that had managed to hang on through the darkness now felt the burn of these caustic showers. Even the oceans were not spared. The acid rain poured into shallow seas, altering the delicate balance that tiny plankton and reef builders depended on. In the oceans, life fared no better than on land. The blanket of dust and soot meant less sunlight for phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that form the base of the marine food chain. As these tiny organisms died off, so did the creatures that fed on them. Small fish, ammonites, and other marine life. Coral reefs that had grown for millions of years collapsed, leaving behind only empty frameworks to drift with the tides. Some animals clung to survival in the shadows of this devastation. Small mammals, which had lived in burrows and crevices for millions of years, could feed on seeds, roots, and even insects that still scurried through the dead leaves. Birds, the last branch of the dinosaur family, took to the skies that were now emptier than ever before, their small bodies and quick life cycles giving them an edge that the giant reptiles did not have. But even they faced hardship, searching for insects and berries that were now few and far between. In every ecosystem, from polar forests, now locked in early ice, to coastal marshes choked by soot, the collapse was relentless. One by one, the once mighty giants of the dinosaur world faded. The impact did not wipe them out in a single night, but set in motion a chain of losses that rippled through every corner of Earth. In the silence that followed the fires, in the darkness that clung for years, life shrank and shifted. What emerged from this long winter would be smaller, quicker, and more adaptable. When you stand today and look at the stars on a clear night, you are looking into the same vastness that sent that asteroid toward Earth. It reminds us that even the greatest creatures can be undone by forces far beyond their control. Yet life did not vanish altogether. It took shelter in burrows and treetops, in seeds hidden in the soil, in creatures small enough to wait out the cold. Fire and darkness closed one chapter of Earth's story, but even in that darkness, life found a way to keep its quiet promise to begin again. When we look back at the end of the age of dinosaurs, it is tempting to imagine an Earth that went completely silent, a world wiped clean by fire and darkness. But life is stubborn. even in the wake of the Chicxulub asteroid, even as forests burned and sunlight vanished behind a shroud of ash. Some creatures held on. They found cracks to hide in, scraps to eat, and small moments of luck that would help them outlive the giants who had ruled the world for millions of years. Understanding how they did it shows us that survival is not always about being the strongest. Sometimes it is about being small, quick, and ready to adapt when the world changes overnight. One of the biggest clues lies with size. When the dust settled and the fires burned out, the world that remained was harsh and barren. Large animals like Triceratops or Tyrannosaurus rex needed enormous amounts of food every day just to stay alive. They had evolved to roam wide plains filled with ferns, flowering plants, and prey animals. But in a world with dying forest and empty fields, that size became a curse. There simply was not enough to eat. Smaller animals, on the other hand, needed far less to survive. A tiny mammal could live on seeds, roots, insects, or anything it could find hidden in the undergrowth. Mammals were already experts at surviving in the shadows. Long before the asteroid arrived, they lived in burrows or crept through the underbrush at night to avoid the eyes of sharp-toothed predators. Many of them were omnivores, willing to eat whatever they could find. This flexibility was an advantage when the green world turned gray and food grew scarce. If one food source vanished, these small survivors could switch to another. A buried cache of seeds or a clutch of insect eggs might mean the difference between life and death when winter stretched on longer than any before. Then there were the birds, the last living branch of the great dinosaur family tree. Not all birds survived the extinction, but enough did to carry on the dinosaur legacy. Small, ground-dwelling birds may have had an edge over their larger cousins. Their feathers helped keep them warm during the sudden cold snaps that swept the earth. Many could eat seeds and insects, which were more likely to persist than lush, leafy plants. Some birds likely nested in protected places like hollow trees or burrows, giving their chicks shelter from the choking dust and acid rain that fell after the impact. Amphibians also made it through this dark chapter. Frogs, salamanders, and their ancient cousins had a way of hiding in places that the fires and fallout could not reach. Many lived in water or damp soil, burrowing into mud to escape the cold and dry air above. Their simple diets and ability to hibernate through hard times gave them a quiet advantage when the rest of the world was too harsh for larger creatures to endure. Reptiles like turtles and crocodiles found similar ways to hang on. Turtles could bury themselves in riverbanks or sink to the bottoms of ponds and lakes, staying safe while the skies above rained ash. Crocodiles lurked in muddy rivers, feeding on whatever scraps drifted their way. Their slow metabolism meant they could survive long periods without food, waiting for the world to heal itself. Even some fish and insects squeaked through this extinction bottleneck. Freshwater environments often proved more stable than the battered oceans, providing shelter for small fish and the amphibians that depended on them. Insects, ever adaptable, found ways to survive on rotting wood, decaying plants, and each other, the same buzzing and crawling life that had fed dinosaurs for millions of years would go on feeding birds and mammals in the empty world that remained. In the end, it was not just luck, but a combination of traits that allowed these survivors to outlast the impact winter. Small bodies, flexible diets, underground hideouts, the ability to hibernate or wait out the worst. These simple advantages mattered far more than horns, claws, or massive teeth. When the dust finally settled and sunlight returned to wake the frozen seeds in sleeping forests, it was these quiet survivors that emerged first. They spread into new niches, carried life's fragile promise forward, and set the stage for the next chapters of Earth's story. So when you see a sparrow hop across your lawn, or a squirrel dash up a tree, or hear frogs sing beside a pond, you are looking at the distant echoes of a world that once burned and darkened but never completely died. These small, determined creatures remind us that sometimes survival is about slipping through the cracks, carrying on when giants fall, and trusting that even the coldest winters give way to spring again. Pure the dinosaurs among us. There's the dinosaurs among us. When we think of dinosaurs today, our minds often leap to towering giants like Brachiosaurus or the fearsome teeth of a Tyrannosaurus rex. But what if I told you that the closest you will ever get to meeting a dinosaur is not by standing beside a fossil in a museum, but by stepping outside and listening for the trill of a sparrow or the caw of a crow? Because the truth is, dinosaurs never fully left this world. They are here with us still, perched on branches and pecking at crumbs in city squares. Birds are not just related to dinosaurs, they are dinosaurs, living, breathing echoes of an ancient lineage that learned to fly and never looked back. This remarkable connection begins with the theropods, a group of mostly meat-eating dinosaurs that walked on two legs and carried sharp claws and teeth. Among them were the raptors, small and nimble, with feathers that first evolved for warmth and later for display. These feathers, which once helped a velociraptor keep warm on a chilly Cretaceous morning, became tools for something more remarkable: flight. Over millions of years, these feathered hunters experimented with shape and size, testing new ways to move through the world until some discovered the sky itself. One of the clearest windows into this story is Archaeopteryx, a creature that lived around 150 million years ago. Its fossilized bones show a beautiful blend of bird and dinosaur. It had a mouthful of sharp teeth and a long bony tail, things no modern bird has, but also feathers arranged in broad wings. It likely could not soar like an eagle or hover like a hummingbird, but it could glide from branch to branch, escaping predators or swooping after prey. Its wishbone and backward-facing pubic bone are features found in modern birds today. Even its claws tell part of the story. Young birds like the Hoatzin chick still have claws on their wings, a living hint of their dinosaur ancestry. As millions of years passed, the blueprint of the bird took shape. Theropods developed lighter, hollow bones that made flight easier. Their claws shrank, their jaws lost teeth, and beaks took over as lighter, sharper tools for cracking seeds, spearing fish, or snapping up insects. The tail shrank to a stub of fused bones we now call the pygostyle, the base for tail feathers that help with balance and maneuvering in the air. Some lineages gave up flying altogether and took to the ground or water instead, but they still carried their dinosaur traits in their skeletons and DNA. Modern birds share more with their ancient relatives than just bones. Their behaviors echo the distant past, too. Many theropods nested in carefully arranged colonies, laid eggs in clutches, and even protected their young. Fossils have been found of small raptors curled protectively around nests, wings spread over eggs as if shielding them from a sudden storm. Today, birds do the same. Think of a mother robin sitting tight over her speckled eggs, or a penguin balancing a chick on its feet in the bitter cold. The very structure of feathers, from fluffy down to stiff flight feathers, remains nearly unchanged since the time they first appeared. Birds still use feathers for warmth, display, camouflage, and flight, just as their dinosaur ancestors did. When you see a peacock fan its tail, you are watching an echo of the displays that once dazzled mates and intimidated rivals under the canopy of ancient forests. Even the songs we hear each morning have deep roots. Some paleontologists believe certain dinosaurs could vocalize in ways more complex than simple hisses or growls. The syrinx, the vocal organ that gives birds their astonishing range of calls and songs, likely evolved in their ancestors' throats millions of years ago. The morning chorus outside your window is not just music, it is a whisper from a world that existed long before humans ever appeared. DNA studies confirm what fossils suggest. The genetic blueprint that shapes a chick in its shell is a map passed down from creatures that walked with giants. Traits like brooding behaviors, hollow bones, three-toed limbs, and feathers all link back to theropods that ran, climbed, and soared through the Mesozoic. Next time you watch a pigeon strut across the pavement, or see a hawk circle high above, take a moment to really see it for what it is, a living dinosaur. It carries within its bones and feathers a story that survived the greatest extinction our planet has known. Long after the last horned giant fell and the forests went quiet, the dinosaurs who learned to fly found a way to keep living. They remind us every day that the past is never really gone. It is perched in the trees, singing its ancient song, carried on wings that have beaten through the ages. Dinosaurs unter paleontology. How we know. Fossils and paleontology. When you hold a fossil in your hand, you are holding a whisper from a world so old that it is hard to imagine. A piece of bone turned to stone, a footprint left in soft mud that hardened like concrete, a leaf pressed flat in rock like nature's own scrapbook. These ancient clues are all that remain of a time when giant dinosaurs thundered across floodplains and tiny mammals hid under ferns. Yet from these scraps of the past, paleontologists have learned to read the Earth's oldest stories, one bone, one layer of rock at a time. But how do these fossils even come to be? Most living things vanish without a trace. A fallen tree rots away. A dead animal is quickly eaten or scattered by wind and rain. To become a fossil is rare and extraordinary. It takes just the right conditions, a perfect balance of luck, timing, and Earth's gentle patience. When a dinosaur died millions of years ago, its body might have been buried quickly by a flood or a landslide. Mud or sand covered its bones, protecting them from the scavengers and the weather. Over time, the soft parts decayed, but the hard bones stayed behind, slowly absorbing minerals from the surrounding groundwater. Bit by bit, these minerals replaced the original bone until only a stone copy remained. Sometimes the fossil is a complete skeleton, as if the creature simply lay down and fell asleep in stone. More often, we find fragments, a jawbone here, a tooth there, a footprint frozen mid-step. Even the smallest fossil can open a door into the past. A single claw tells us about a predator's hunting habits. A fossilized egg reveals how dinosaurs nested and cared for their young. Footprints can show herds moving together, little ones walking in the safety of adults. These bits and pieces are like puzzle pieces, scattered through time. Finding these ancient treasures is part science and part old-fashioned detective work. Paleontologists often trek to remote places where the right rocks are exposed: badlands, cliffs, deserts, and river valleys. They spend hours carefully scanning slopes for the hint of a bone peeking out from the dust. A simple change in color or texture can mean the difference between bare rock and the remains of an animal that lived millions of years ago. Sometimes a fossil is found by accident, by a hiker, a farmer, or even a child playing near a stream. Once a fossil is found, the real work begins. Paleontologists must carefully remove it without breaking it. They use brushes, dental picks, and tiny chisels, inching away rock that has protected the fossil for eons. Sometimes, Large fossils are wrapped in plaster jackets, like a cast for a broken bone, so they can be safely transported to a lab. There, the stone shell is removed with even more delicate tools until the fossil inside is revealed in full. But digging up a fossil is only the beginning. The next step is to figure out what it means. How old is it? What animal did it belong to? What did that animal eat? Did it live alone or in herds? Modern science helps answer these questions in ways early fossil hunters could hardly dream of. High-tech tools like CT scanners let scientists peek inside fossilized bones without damaging them. Chemical analysis can detect ancient proteins and even pigments, giving hints about the colors that once decorated feathers and scales. By studying bone structure, paleontologists can tell how fast an animal grew, how its muscles worked, and how it might have moved. Fossils found together help paint a bigger picture. An ancient riverbed crowded with bones can show a herd struck by drought or caught in a sudden flood. Plant fossils nearby reveal what the environment looked like. Pollen grains trapped in rock layers tell us what the air smelled like millions of years ago. It is a patient kind of detective work. Every discovery adds another brushstroke to the giant canvas of Earth's past, and sometimes those discoveries rewrite the story altogether. Just think about the dinosaur renaissance that began when paleontologists realized some of these creatures were not slow and scaly, but feathered, warm-blooded, and lively. Each fossil is a reminder that our understanding of the past is always growing. So next time you see a fossil in a museum display or read about a newly named dinosaur, remember the journey behind that single stone, a fallen giant buried by mud, minerals working their quiet magic through the ages, a scientist crouched in the heat or cold, brushing away layers of time, and you standing there millions of years later, seeing the echo of a world long gone, a story hidden in rock, waiting for someone curious enough to listen. When you stop to think about it, it is almost strange how creatures that vanished 66 million years ago still live so vividly in our minds. For something that no human has ever seen alive, dinosaurs are everywhere. They stomp across our movie screens with deafening roars and swoop through picture books on bright wings. They loom in museum halls, their fossil bones arranged like silent guardians of an ancient past. They peer down from murals, stand proudly as toys in children's rooms, and fill our dreams with what-ifs and wild stories. Long after their bones settled into stone, dinosaurs have become part of who we are, not just as paleontology, but as symbols of mystery, imagination, and our endless hunger to know what came before. Perhaps it starts when we are young. Almost every child goes through a dinosaur phase, that magical time when they learn to say complicated names like Triceratops or Pachycephalosaurus before they can tie their own shoes. There is something irresistible about these creatures that were so big, so strange, yet so real. They feel like monsters, but they are not invented. They really lived and breathed on this same earth we now walk. Their bones connect us to a world where the rules were different, a place that feels far away yet still lingers under our feet. Stories and myths about giant bones have been around for thousands of years. Long before the word dinosaur was even coined, people dug up massive fossils and spun tales to explain them. Ancient Greeks found huge bones and thought they belonged to giants or heroes from their myths. In parts of China, the bones of long-extinct creatures were once thought to be the remains of dragons. In North America, some indigenous stories tell of thunderbirds and earth monsters that might echo memories of fossils unearthed by wind and rain. Then came the golden age of paleontology. In the 19th century, explorers and fossil hunters in Europe and America began piecing together the skeletons of these long-lost creatures. They named them terrible lizards, dinosaurs, and displayed them in grand halls that filled visitors with awe. These reconstructions gave people their first real sense that Earth was older and wilder than they had ever imagined. And then came the movies. Who can forget the first time they saw a T-Rex in a film? Jaws open in a roar that made the ground shake. From stop-motion monsters in early black and white adventures to the groundbreaking effects of Jurassic Park, dinosaurs have thundered across our screens for generations. They remind us of nature's raw power and of the fragile balance that lets life flourish. They show us how quickly it can change, how giants can fall, and how the smallest survivors can inherit the world. Dinosaurs have inspired artists, storytellers, scientists, and daydreamers alike. They appear on postage stamps, in paintings, and on everything from bedsheets to cereal boxes. They have become symbols of extinction and endurance at the same time. They show us the limits of our control over nature, but also the beauty that comes when we listen to the stones beneath our feet and the stories they tell. And yet, perhaps the most beautiful part of this story is that dinosaurs never really left us. Every morning, when you hear a robin singing outside your window or see a pigeon pecking at crumbs in the park, you are hearing and seeing the living descendants of creatures that walked with Tyrannosaurus and Triceratops. The feathers that catch the sunlight, the nests built with care, the eggs warmed by a parent's steady heartbeat, all of these are echoes of a world that once seemed lost, but found a way to endure. So next time you hear a bird's call or see it take flight, pause for a moment and remember you are watching a whisper from an ancient age, a heartbeat that carried on when the giants fell. Dinosaurs live on in every chirp, every flap of wings, every feather drifting to the ground. And if you ever want to keep wandering through these hidden corners of deep time, I invite you to stay with me here on the Snoozy Scientist. Let us keep exploring these stories that connect us to the past and spark our sense of wonder. If you enjoyed this gentle journey through the age of dinosaurs, please tap that like button and subscribe for more slow, thoughtful adventures. Leave me a comment and tell me which dinosaur sparks your imagination the most. Until next time, may you carry a little piece of ancient wonder wherever you go, and may every bird song remind you that the past is never really gone.